Hello, grade 10. Today's lesson is lesson 4.6, which is called Completing the Square. And we're going to learn a third way of finding vertex form from standard form. So on your handout that you'll find on Teams, at the top there's a box with key ideas, and it says this. The max and min point, or the vertex, on a parabola which models a scenario is often significant or useful information in that context. For example, it may indicate the max profit. To find the vertex from each form of the equation, in vertex form, you would read it directly from the equation. So vertex form is y equals a, x minus h squared plus k. And h and k form your vertex. In factored form, which is y equals a, x minus s, x minus t, you would use the zeros, which are s and t, to find the axis of symmetry, which is halfway between the zeros. Then take the x value, the axis of symmetry, insert it back into the equation to find the y coordinate of the vertex. And then for standard form, there are 3 different ways to find the vertex. First, you can factor it completely, find the zeros, and then do what you did in the second point, which was find the zeros, find their midpoint, and then plug that into the equation to find the y value. Or the second option, you can partially factor, which we did in the last lesson, to find 2 points that are across from each other on the parabola. Then you could find their midpoint, which would be the axis of symmetry, and then the y value of the vertex by plugging that axis back into the equation. Or the third way to find the vertex would be to complete the square, and that's what we're going to learn how to do today. So I'm given an equation in standard form right here. And this is a completed example of completing the square. I'm going to talk about each step, and then I will do some examples where I work through the steps. So this is a multi-step process. So the first thing you need to do is take out the a value from the first 2 terms. So I'm going to write that down. Take a value out of first 2 terms. So in this case, the a value is -3. I want the a value inside my bracket to be 1, so I want to get rid of the whole a value. So the first 2 terms I'm going to divide by -3. Now I'm left with this -3 out in front, and then inside the bracket, x squared minus 8, because 24 divided by -3 is -8, x bracket. Notice how they also both have an x, but I'm not going to take the x out. I only take the a value out, and then leave the 10 at the end. The next thing I do is I need to look at the b value, which is the second term. Look at the b value, divide it in half, so divide it by 2, and then square it. So look at the b value, divide by 2, and square it. So see how it's 8 divided by 2 squared. Then I'm going to add that number inside the bracket and subtract it. Step 3. Add and subtract that number inside the bracket. And since I'm adding it and then subtracting it, it's like I'm adding nothing. It's like I'm adding 0, right? Because if I add something and then take that same thing away, nothing has really changed, and that's why I'm allowed to do that. But what I'm doing is I'm creating a perfect square. That's why it's called completing the square. All right, so then the next step, so if I do 8 divided by 2, that's 4. 4 squared is going to give me 16. Right, so this number is actually 16. So I simplified by writing 16. Now I want to take this second term and get it out of the bracket. So in order to do that, I need to multiply it by the a value, which is in front. So that number was also 16. So I'll do -3 times -16, because it's a negative. All right, so now I have -3 bracket x squared minus 8x plus 16 bracket minus 3 times -16, and then that plus 10 on the end. Now I'm going to simplify. So -3 times -16 is positive 48, and plus 10. This bracket now, I have created a perfect square that I can factor. It's now factorable. So I need two numbers that multiply to 16 and add to -8, and that would be -4 and -4. And the whole purpose of doing this is so that we get two brackets that are the same, so that we can write them as x minus 4 squared. And now when I simplify, -3, x minus 4 squared, 48 plus 10 is 58, now I have an equation that's in vertex form. Because this bracket is squared, because those two are the same, this is squared, so now I have x minus 4 squared plus 58. And the vertex is 4, 58. Right, so see how I went from standard form down to vertex form? That was my whole entire purpose of doing this, to find the vertex. All right, on the next part of your handout, you will see a diagram. This is in the box beside what we just did. And this is just a different way of showing you the same thing, but it's more for visual learners. So if you find that this diagram confuses you, just ignore what I'm saying. But if you tend to learn better with pictures, then follow along closely. So this is what we're doing to complete the square. So if we have x squared, those first two terms, x squared plus bx, that's what's in the bracket, then I can draw that into a square. The square x squared is a square with sides x times x, right? In the area, that would be x squared. And the other shape would be bx. One side length would be x, which is the same here, and the other side length would be b. Now, if I take this b side length and I divide it in half, so b divided by 2, remember how we took the b value and we divided it by 2, and I put half of it here and half of it here, so this length now is half of b. Then I'm just missing one little part of my full square. Now I'm creating a bigger square. What would complete this square, or fill it in completely, is if I did this side length of half of b times the side length of half of b, right? So half of b times half of b would create this tiny little square that would fit perfectly into this section, and it would now complete my bigger square. So that's essentially what we're doing when we complete the square. Okay, now to the examples below. Number 1. Y equals x squared plus 6x plus 9. So I am going to take the a value out of my first two terms. However, the a value in this situation is 1. See how there's nothing written here? That means the a value is 1. So we don't actually need to take anything out in this case because our a value is 1. So then we would just write in a bracket x squared plus 6x and then leave the plus 9 out on the end. Now we're going to take the b value, which is 6, and divide it by 2 and then square it. So you leave the x squared plus 6x there, plus 6 divided by 2 in a bracket squared, and then minus 6 divided by 2 in a bracket squared, and bracket plus 9. Now I'm going to simplify these 6 divided by 2 squareds. So I have x squared plus 6x. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So plus 9 minus 9 plus 9. Now I'm going to get rid of the negative term in the bracket. That last term we always want to end up taking back out. So in order to take it back out, we typically have to multiply it by the a value. There is no a value, so we can just take it out. Negative 9 plus 9. Now we're going to factor our bracket, which two numbers that multiply to 9 and add to 6 would be 3 and 3. X plus 3, x plus 3. Negative 9 plus 9 is 0. So we're left with x plus 3 squared, because we have two brackets that are the same, plus 0. Okay, so this example actually could have been done without completing the square because it was factorable, but I just wanted to show you how to complete the square anyways. So the vertex in this situation is negative 3, 0. And the reason that it's negative is because vertex form, if we go back over here, vertex form is always x minus h. So now when I have x plus 3, it's always the opposite sign inside the bracket, negative 3, and the c value is 0, so that means it's negative 3 comma 0. All right, number 2. Y equals 3x squared plus 6x minus 8. So I'm going to start by looking at the first two terms and taking out the a value. So take out the 3. That leaves me with x squared. 6x divided by 3 is 2x. And then leave that negative 8 outside of the bracket. Now I'm going to look at the b value, divide it by 2 and square it. So leave everything else the same. 2x plus 2 divided by 2 in brackets squared minus 2 divided by 2 in brackets squared, end bracket, minus 8. Y equals 3 x squared plus 2x. Okay, now I'm going to simplify those brackets. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. Plus 1 minus 1. Bracket minus 8. Now I'm going to get that last term out of the bracket by multiplying it by the 3. So 3x squared plus 2x plus 1 bracket 3 times negative 1 is negative 3 minus 8. Y equals 3. Okay, let's factor the bracket. Two numbers that multiply to 1 and add to 2 would be 1 times 1. So x plus 1, x plus 1, and then negative 3 minus 8 is negative 11. Rewrite this, combining these two brackets with a squared. Y equals 3x plus 1 squared minus 11. That is now in vertex form, and our vertex is negative 1, negative 11. Remember, you always switch the sign inside this bracket. Okay, onto the back of the page, number 3. Y equals negative 3x squared plus 12x minus 14. So I'm going to look at the first two terms and take out the a value. Y equals negative 3 bracket x squared. 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4x bracket minus 14. Now I'm going to look at the b value, which is negative 4, and do negative 4 divided by 2. Sorry, we add that. Negative 4 divided by 2 squared minus negative 4 divided by 2 squared, end bracket, minus 14. Y equals negative 3 x squared minus 4x plus, so we have negative 4 divided by 2 would be negative 2. Negative 2 squared is positive 4 minus 4, end bracket, minus 14. Now we want to get that second or that last term out of the bracket. So in order to do that, we need to multiply it by negative 3. So negative 3 times x squared minus 4x plus 4. And then negative 3 times negative 4 is positive 12 minus 14. Negative 3. Okay, now let's factor the bracket. So two numbers that multiply to 4 and add to negative 4 would be negative 2 and negative 2. and then 12 minus 14 is negative 2. We will simplify by combining those two brackets with a squared, negative 3x minus 2 squared minus 2. Now my vertex is going to be 2, negative 2. Number 4. Y equals negative 1/5 x squared plus 2x plus 3. Okay, so we're going to start by looking at the first two terms and take out the a value. So even though it doesn't look like this is a greatest common factor, we always take out the entire a value. So whatever the a value is, you take that number out because you want the number in front of the x squared inside the bracket to be 1. So we need to do 2 divided by negative 1/5 in order to figure out what that number is going to be. So in order to divide by a fraction, we multiply by the reciprocal. And 2 times negative 5 equals negative 10. So it seems backwards that when you divide by a smaller number, you get a bigger number. But that's why it's important to do that either on your calculator or just on the side there. So that leaves me with negative 1/5 bracket x squared minus 10x bracket plus 3. Y equals negative 1/5 x squared minus 10x. We look at the b value, divide it by 2 and square it. Negative 10 divided by 2 squared minus negative 10 divided by 2 squared bracket plus 3. Y equals negative 1/5. Let's simplify. X squared minus 10x. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. Squared is 25. So plus 25 minus 25 bracket plus 3. Y equals negative 1/5 x squared minus 10x plus 25. Now we want to get that last term out of the bracket, so we need to do negative 1/5 times negative 25. Negative 1/5 times negative 25 equals positive 25 over 5, which is 5. So end bracket plus 5 plus 3. Negative 1/5. Factor the bracket, so two numbers that multiply to 25 and add to negative 10 would be negative 5 and negative 5. And then 5 plus 3 is 8. Simplify by combining those two brackets. Negative 1/5 x minus 5 squared plus 8. And the vertex is 5, 8. Okay, number 5. Y equals negative 3x squared minus 5x. So again, look at the first two terms. There are only two terms, but you still just look at the first two terms, same as before. Take out the a value. So y equals negative 3 bracket x squared. Now, to take out a negative 3 from a negative 5, we need to do negative 5 divided by negative 3, which would be a positive 5 over 3. Now look at our b value, which is 5/3. Divide it by 2 and square it. So 5/3 divided by 2 is the same as 5/3 times the reciprocal, which is 1/2, which is 5/6. And now we need to do 5/6 squared. So that would be 5/6 times 5/6 would be 25 over 36. So plus 25 over 36 minus 25 over 36. Y equals negative 3 bracket x squared plus 5/3 x plus 25 over 36. Get that last term out of the bracket by doing negative 3 times negative 25 over 36. We can simplify by canceling out a 3. So that would leave us with negative 1 times negative 25 is positive 25 over 12. and then we'll factor the bracket. So two numbers that multiply to 25 over 36 and add to 5/3 seems confusing, but it's the number that you got when you divided the b value by 2. So it's 5/6, and it's going to be positive because these are both positive. So we'll have x plus 5/6 squared plus 25 over 12. And now the vertex is going to be 5/6, 25 over 12. All right, and the last example, number 6. A gardener wants to enclose a rectangular vegetable garden with 60 concrete curbstones, each 1 meter long. A, write an expression for the number of curbstones used, that would be perimeter, and for area. So we need to write two equations. So it's a rectangular vegetable garden. So a rectangle is defined by length, width times length, or we use W and L for width and length. So the perimeter of a rectangle is 2 length plus 2 width. Now, he's using 60 curbstones altogether, and they're each 1 meter long. So that means there's going to be a total of 60 meters. So the perimeter is 60 equals 2L plus 2W. Now we can we can isolate one of the variables and then substitute that into the area equation to create a simplified expression. So let's isolate the L. So we'll subtract 2W from both sides. So 60 minus 2W equals 2L. Divide both sides by 2. And that will leave us with L. 60 divided by 2 is 30. Minus 2 divided by 2 is just 1W. So L equals 30 minus W. Now, the area of a rectangle is length times width. So if the length equals W minus 30, we're going to plug that in for L. So we have area equals 30 minus W times W equals 30W minus W squared. And that is our expression for area. Now letter B says, how should the gardener lay out the curbstones to maximize the total enclosed area? As soon as you see the word maximize, you need to think vertex. So our equation is area equals 30W minus W squared. So we need to get this into vertex form, or we need to find the vertex either by completing the square or factoring, finding the zeros, and so on. So let's complete the square. The first and most important thing is to rearrange this equation so the W squared is the first term. So negative W squared plus 30W. We're going to take out the A value, which is negative 1, W squared minus 30W. Now we're going to look at the B value, which is 30. We're going to divide it by 2 and square it. Negative W squared minus 30W. 30 divided by 2 is 15. 15 squared is 225. Then we're going to get that last term out of the bracket by multiplying it by the negative. So we have negative W squared minus 30W plus 225 plus 225. We're going to factor the bracket, two numbers that multiply to 225 and add to negative 30. That would be negative 15 and negative 15. So our equation in vertex form is negative bracket W minus 15 bracket squared plus 225. So that means our vertex is 15, 225. That means that W is 15. So our rectangle, the width is 15. The length, we said, equals 30 minus W. Well, if W is 15, then the length equals 30 minus 15, so the length also equals 15. So this is actually a square. maximum area happens when this is a square. All right, so that completes our lesson. Let me know if you have any questions and have a good day.